What's up, Autobots and Decepticons? It's Chris, here with Good Roads, coming back to you. Things are kind of crazy right now. Things are pretty crazy right now. The first thing I want to say is that I hope that you and yours are safe, and I wish the best of luck to you and to everyone else out there as we go through these difficult times. Well-wishing and hoping you good health aside, this pandemic has had a serious effect on the world at large, obviously, and also in our little world of board sports. Season's done. Snowboarding season is officially canceled. All the resorts, local and abroad, have shut down, rightfully so. We don't want people congregating and spreading the disease. I'm temporarily out of work. I'm isolated in my house. I'm not doing much riding. We have about an inch of snow where I am right now, so not enough to snowboard, but enough to prevent me from skateboarding or mountain So I find myself with a lot of spare time, and I'm basically stuck in my house, which is right above my shop. So I figure life is handing all of us some serious lemons right now. Let me try to make a little lemonade out of it. You guys seem to really enjoy the snowboard building content that I put on the channel. With that last two-part series on the advanced powder board build, the channel broke 200 subscribers. So thank you for that. It really does mean a lot. That's one of the ways that I can tell that people are enjoying the content that I put out. So if you do like the content, please subscribe. I'm gonna do my best to keep putting out good stuff that I think you guys will enjoy, show off fun projects, and try to teach you how to make boards. So that said, I'm gonna take this opportunity, this lockdown, to make a big jump and pull the trigger and build a legit snowboard. What does that mean? It's gonna have a proper core. The core is gonna be profiled. It's gonna have a shaped base. It's gonna have a full wrap set of edges, binding inserts. It's gonna be composite. I mean, anything that would go into a standard snowboard, we're gonna recreate it here, and we're gonna make all the tools and jigs that we need in order to accomplish all those things. This is a project that I have been thinking about, researching, and building up to for literally years. I'm a little nervous and a lot excited, and given the situation with the lockdown, I can't think of a better time to start it than now. So, we're gonna start building a snowboard. And I think the best place to start is from the middle and work our way out, so we are gonna start by making a core. Snowboards have cores that are made out of wood. They can be horizontally or vertically laminated, although vertically laminated cores by far are the most prevalent treatment. And what that means is they're made of strips of wood glued together side by side. There are some other techniques being applied nowadays by companies who have the tooling to be able to do it, especially on asymmetrical boards. You see a lot of wood grain going kind of all different directions, which is really cool that we have the technology and the time invested in developing these building techniques to like be able to control things to that high a level. Like, whew, makes my little nerd shaping brain go nuts. I'm super excited about it. I'm not gonna go that crazy into it. This is my first board. We're gonna make a standard vertically laminated snowboard core. Now, the woods that are used for cores are pretty variable. There are a lot of different approaches and thoughts about how you can get the different characteristics out of your board that you want using different types of wood. Some common woods that you'll see in core construction are poplar, birch, beech. Aspen is supposed to be pretty good. Sometimes you'll see some balsa wood for some really light woods. And then your stringers are where you'll start to see hardwoods like a maple. And regardless of how you want to use those different woods for their different qualities throughout the board, you always want to have stringers running tip to tail. And what that is they're two strips of a harder, denser wood that your binding inserts go into. And they do a very important function, which is make sure that your binding inserts don't pull through. A lot of force gets applied to those little pieces of metal, and if you were to house them in something like a balsa wood, they would destroy the board from the inside out. So the first strips of wood that we're gonna prepare for our core are the stringers. I'm gonna be using walnut for my stringers, which is, I think, a pretty atypical wood, but it's a wood that I had available. I'm cutting it out of some old flooring that was given to me off of a demolition site. Since these stringers are meant to house the binding inserts, I'm gonna take my fence on my table saw and set it based on the width of the binding insert. Once the fence is in place, I'm gonna power up the saw and rip out my rough stock for my stringers. For the rest of my core, I'm gonna be using poplar, and for these, I wanna actually use the longer dimension on those boards. So I'm gonna be ripping them using my bandsaw, and I'm actually gonna go in and clean up the walnut the same way. After all my stock is ripped, I'm gonna run it through my planer a couple times, both sides, to make sure that my boards are, first of all, they're all the same thickness, and second of all, they're a uniform thickness tip to tail. Now, since I'm just using a planer for this, some of my staves, some of my strips of wood might end up with a little bit of a cup to them, but when we go to attach it all together into a single unit, we're going to take some precautions against that. And that's the next step, so why don't I just demonstrate that for you. The next thing we're gonna do is lay down all of our strips of wood the way they're gonna be laid out in the core. And then what we're gonna do is take a really generous amount of glue and apply it to all of the edges of our strips of wood. Partway through, I remember this technique where if you have strips of the same height, you can stand them on end and cover all of the edges at once. It'll save you a little bit of time, and that's particularly helpful if you're working with a glue with a pot life. The next step is going to be to clamp all of our parts together so that the glue seam as it dries is nice and tight, there aren't any gaps. The first thing that I'm doing is laying out some staves and then some weight, and that is going to make sure that even though some of our boards are kind of bent, they're all aligned horizontally on the same plane. After that, I'm just taking literally every bar clamp that I own and squeezing all of those strips of wood together. Great. Now we wait for the glue to dry. My glue for the core here ended up being a little messy. There were a couple things that I had to adjust for on the fly that I didn't anticipate, like having spars underneath the wood, but my glue joint should work out just fine. It's gonna be a matter of cleaning up after the fact. So with the power of editing, we're gonna wait a night, go back down into the shop, and take our core out of the clamps. And this is one of the results of that messy glue up. My staves are glued to my core. It's also glued to the table, so we want to try to get it detached from that. And then I'm gonna just gently pry these staves off of my core. Very gently, ever so gently. Just the gentlest touch. Yeah, truly a delicate operation. Kidding aside, the core came out really well. I'm happy with all the glue seams. I don't see any gap. There's squeeze out, which means that there was more than enough glue in all of those seams. But I do need to flatten this core back out, which means I have to go clean up all of that squeezed out glue. And to do that, I just grab the block plane, and anywhere I can feel that the glue is raised, I'm just going in and planing it back down. This doesn't have to be super clean or neat, it's just to give us a flat surface to run it through the planer. And wouldn't you guess it, that's the next step. We're gonna take our roughly planed core blank and run it through the planer top and bottom so that we have nice flat surfaces and so that we have a nice even width core blank to work with for the rest of our build. And here is that blank. We've got our walnut stringers and we've got poplar in between the stringers and kind of on the wings here. I've given myself some generous dimensions here. So this is wider than the board's gonna be. It's also longer tip to tail than the board's gonna be, so that as I'm going through and shaping things like the sidewalls, I've got a little bit of room for error because I wanna leave myself the ability to make mistakes because I've never done this before and I am definitely gonna make some mistakes. So let's leave ourselves a little buffer. I can talk really quickly about my wood choices. There wasn't much of a choice for the woods that I had available, but let's talk about what these woods will do. Most of our core is poplar, and for a hardwood, it's a pretty light wood. And then my stringers are, well, they're walnut, which is pretty unusual. The only other point of reference I have for walnut versus maple, maple's a pretty common stringer wood, poplar is too, for what it's worth, is instrument building. They're both tone woods. And I think some of the qualities of a tone wood are similar to the qualities of wood you would want in a snowboard. They're light, they're springy, they've got pop, like you want a soundboard to resonate and vibrate very quickly. You want the same thing, that same like deflection and then return to position in a snowboard. And maple is fast and snappy. Walnut is still really springy. When it comes to instruments, it's got more of a thunk instead of a bright sound. And this is just a guess, but I think it might actually have some shock absorbing properties, and this is gonna be a powder board. So that could be kind of cool. You know, to compare it, I'd have to make a bunch of other cores and build many boards of the same shape and try them out, but you know, just some rough guesses based on some general woodworking experience I have. Regardless of the qualities of the wood we selected, this is gonna be a great core blank to work from. I'm so excited. I have been dreaming about doing this exact thing for a very long time. And this means it's real. This means we started building a real snowboard. We have a real core blank. If you guys can't tell, I am really excited about this project. There's so much to it. This is not gonna be a two-part series. This is gonna be quite a long one. I think the next thing we're gonna tackle is the base sheet, which doesn't sound particularly interesting, but the base sheet is what informs the shape of the edges, and the edges are your routing template for shaping the board in general. So getting the base sheet right is, I don't think I can overstate how important that is. At least from a beginner's point of view. So that'll be the next video. I hope you guys are excited about this build. I hope you stick around for the journey. Again, to those of you who are subscribed, thank you for that. It really does mean a lot. It makes me excited to see that number go up. And if you want to support, you want to show me that you guys like the stuff and you're interested in it, make that number go up, hit subscribe. And as always, if you leave messages, if you have questions, I try my best to answer them. Thanks for coming along with me on the journey. Can't wait to see where it takes us, guys. I'm really excited about this one. I'll see you soon. Beyond safety and health, let's take a look at some of the impact that the coronavirus, the COVID, corvids are crows.